I was running late and I hated it. Austin was turning 1 year old, and I had promised myself I would be there from the very beginning, but work had other plans. I remember glancing at the clock on my dashboard, whispering apologies to a 1 year old who would never know the difference, and telling myself I would make it up to him with the gifts I had spent weeks carefully picking out. A stuffed bear, a little learning tablet, and a card I had written myself. I had spent more time on that card than I would ever admit. He couldn't read yet, but I wanted it to be perfect anyway. That was just the kind of aunt I was. The kind who showed up. The kind who meant it. The venue surprised me the moment I pulled into the parking lot. It was beautiful. Decorated and catered and full of cars I recognized. I remember smiling to myself, thinking that Avery had somehow pulled this together on her own. I had offered to pay for a party just weeks before. I had offered to at least throw a small barbecue. Something simple, something that would give Austin a memory, even if he was too young to keep it. Never mind, I'll just get him a cake. Besides, I have to work that day. Avery had said. I had felt guilty about that. I had actually felt guilty that my sister was spending her son's first birthday working while I went on with my day. So I let it go. Then one morning, my phone lit up with an email invitation. Austin's first birthday party. A venue, a date, a time, red and gold decorations, his little lion colors. It was beautiful. I stared at it for a moment, and then I smiled. She must have changed her mind. Maybe someone had helped her pull it together. Maybe she wanted to surprise me with the news. I didn't question it for a single second. I was just happy. Happy for Avery. Happy for Austin. I bought him gifts that same afternoon. Now, I was standing in a parking lot, staring at a venue that cost far more than a cake and a work shift, still believing I had been invited on purpose. Still believing my sister wanted me there. I grabbed Austin's gifts from the back seat, straightened my clothes, and walked inside. The balloons were red and gold. The tables were decorated with little lion centerpieces, because Avery always said Austin was her little lion. There was a catered spread along one wall and a beautiful custom cake at the center of it all. A banner read, "Happy First Birthday, Austin," in gold letters. It was everything I had offered to give him. I stood at the entrance for just a moment, taking it all in, feeling that warmth that only a child's birthday can produce. And then I started recognizing faces. Mom and Dad near the far end of the room. Of course they would be here. Cousins I hadn't seen in months. Aunts and uncles filling the seats and talking and laughing. That made sense too. And then I saw Larry and Martha, my in-laws, standing near the cake table, completely at home, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. I felt the first small crack somewhere deep in my chest. Larry and Martha barely knew Avery. We had shared maybe 3 or 4 family gatherings over the years, and the conversation had always been polite, but distant. There was no reason for them to be here. No reason I could think of that made any sense at all. I moved further into the room looking for Avery to say hello, to hand over the gifts, to squeeze my nephew and tell him happy birthday. And that was when I saw him. Wyatt, my husband. The man who had kissed me goodbye 3 days ago and told me his business trip had come up suddenly and he couldn't get out of it. The man I had believed without a single question, because that was what you did when you trusted someone with your whole heart. He was standing near the center of the room, holding Austin, and Avery's arm was around his waist. She was leaning in close, saying something softly to the baby, smiling the way you smile at something that belongs to you. Austin had his tiny hand wrapped around Wyatt's collar, and Wyatt was looking down at that little boy with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Something warm and unguarded and completely at home. "Wyatt?" I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended, but it was loud enough. Heads turned, and then like a wave moving slowly across water, the conversations stopped one by one. The laughter died. The music kept playing, but everything else went quiet. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, Mom, Dad, Larry, Martha, every single person in that room turned and looked at me standing at the entrance holding a stuffed bear and a learning tablet and a card I had spent too much time writing. Wyatt looked up last. The expression on his face when he saw me standing there is something I will never be able to fully describe. It wasn't just guilt. It was the look of a man watching something he had carefully constructed for a very long time begin to fall apart in real time. "Wyatt, why are you here? You said you had a business trip. What is going on here?" "Someone tell me what is going on," I said. Nobody spoke. I looked at Larry. He looked away. I looked at Martha. She looked down at her hands. I looked at my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, every familiar face in that room. Not one of them would meet my eyes. Not one of them opened their mouth. Mom moved toward me. "Miranda." Mom started. "Don't," I said. I took a step back and looked around the room one more time. At every person who had eaten at my table. Every person I had celebrated, supported, shown up for, without question. Every person who had smiled at me, hugged me, called me on my birthday, sat across from me at Christmas dinner knowing exactly what I did not know. Every single one of them had known. I could see it on their faces, in the way they couldn't look at me, in the way nobody moved and nobody spoke, and nobody, not one single person in a room full of people who claimed to love me, had ever once picked up the phone. "Not one person in this family wanted to tell me?" I asked. The silence was my answer. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at Wyatt holding my sister's baby with my sister's arm around his waist. I looked at every face in that room one last time. And I nodded slowly, because I understood now. I understood everything. "You are all dead to me." The words tore out of me from somewhere I didn't know existed, raw and broken and final. I didn't scream it the way you scream in anger. I screamed it the way you scream when something inside you is dying and you need the whole world to know. And then I turned and I walked out. I walked to my car, I got inside, and I drove home alone while everyone I had ever loved stood in a party venue surrounded by red and gold balloons and said nothing. My name is Miranda Cole, and this is my story. I don't remember the drive home. I remember pulling into the driveway and sitting in the car for a long time with my hands still on the steering wheel, staring at the front door of the house Wyatt and I had picked out together. The house we had painted together on a Saturday afternoon, arguing about the shade of white for the trim, laughing about nothing. The house where I had built a life around a man who had been building something else entirely on the side. The house was quiet when I walked in. I moved through the living room slowly, touching nothing, looking at everything differently. The framed photo on the wall of our wedding day, the blanket on the couch we had picked out together, the coffee mug he had left on the counter before he left for his supposed business trip. Everything looked exactly the same, and nothing would ever be the same again. I sat on the edge of the bed and I stared at the wall. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard his car pull into the driveway. I heard the front door open. I heard his footsteps moving through the house, slow and deliberate, the way you walk when you already know what is waiting for you. And then he appeared in the doorway of our bedroom, still in the same clothes he had been wearing at the party, looking at me with an expression that sat somewhere between guilt and defiance. He didn't apologize. He walked into the room and stood near the doorway with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, like he was the one who had been wronged. "Miranda, you need to calm down. This was never supposed to happen this way," Wyatt said. I looked at him. I looked at this man I had loved with everything I had. This man I had chosen, defended, believed, and built a life around. And I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not grief. Something colder and quieter and more permanent than either of those things. "You're right. It was never supposed to happen this way. I was never supposed to find out. That's what you mean, isn't it, Wyatt?" "Not that it shouldn't have happened, just that I shouldn't have known," I said. He opened his mouth. "Don't," I said. "Did you really even love me?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. "Yes, I love you, Miranda. I have always loved you," Wyatt said. I looked at him for a long time, and I almost let myself believe it. Almost. "No, you didn't, because this is not what love looks like," I said. "Why?" I asked. He said nothing for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, it was the most devastating answer he could have given. "I don't know," Wyatt said. "I don't know. He blew up my entire life, and he didn't even have a reason." I stood up from the edge of the bed, and I looked at him the way you look at something you are seeing clearly for the very first time. "No, sorry will ever fix this. Not yours. Not anyone's. I will let you go. I cannot live with someone who lies, and tell Avery not to show herself to me, ever. I cannot have a sister who is a thief. She is dead to me, and so are you," I said. The room was so quiet after that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from down the hall. Wyatt stood in the doorway looking at me like he was waiting for something to follow those words. An explosion, a breakdown, tears he could use to pull me back. I gave him nothing, and then came the knock at the front door. 3 slow, careful knocks, the kind of knock that already knows it isn't welcome. "That's your parents," Wyatt said quietly. "I know," I said. I walked past him without another word and went to the front door. And when I opened it, there they were. Dan and Sheila Stevens. My parents. The 2 people who were supposed to love me first and most and longest, standing on my porch with careful expressions and clasped hands, looking at me the way you look at someone you have already decided needs to be managed rather than comforted. "Baby, can we come in?" Mom asked. I stepped aside and let them through, because I had something to say to them too. They sat on my couch, my parents, Dan and Sheila Stevens. Sitting on the couch in the living room of the house I shared with my husband, looking around the room like they were taking inventory of everything that was about to change. Wyatt had quietly moved to the kitchen doorway, close enough to hear, far enough to pretend he wasn't listening. Nobody spoke for a moment. "Miranda, I know what you're feeling right now. You're angry. You have every right to be angry. But I need you to think about what you do next very carefully." Mom said, "How long have you known? How long have you been sitting across from me at dinner, calling me on my birthday, hugging me at Christmas, knowing what Avery and Wyatt were doing?" I asked. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. "We found out when Avery told us she was pregnant," Dad said quietly. I nodded slowly. Austin was 1 year old, which meant they had known for almost 2 years. They had known before Austin was born. They had sat with that secret through an entire pregnancy, through a birth, through a first year of that baby's life. They had watched me buy gifts for that child. They had watched me offer to pay for his party. They had watched me love him completely, and they had said absolutely nothing. And then Mom said something I hadn't expected. "Miranda, the invitation was a mistake. You were never supposed to receive it. Avery accidentally included you in the email. When she saw you walk through that door, she realized what had happened." Mom said quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. "So I wasn't just betrayed at that party. I was only there by accident. We didn't know how to tell you. We were afraid of what it would do to this family. Miranda, Avery made a terrible mistake. But Austin is here now. He is innocent in all of this. Please find it in your heart to forgive. Keep this family together, Miranda," Mom pleaded. And there it was, the script. The same script she had been reading from my entire life. "Do you remember when I was 9 years old? Avery took my birthday money, the money Grandma had given me. She spent every single dollar of it, and you sat me down and said, 'Family forgives family,'" I said. "Miranda, that was," Mom started. "Do you remember when I got accepted into the summer program, the one I had worked for all year? And Avery cried because she didn't get in? And you pulled me aside and said your sister needs it more, and you made me give up my spot." I said, "That was a long time ago," Dad started. "Do you remember every single time she took something that was mine? Every single time she wanted something I had? Do you remember what you always said to me? 'Just give it to her. You're older. Keep the peace. Be the bigger person. Please, Miranda, keep the peace.'" I said. The room was very quiet. "I have been keeping the peace my entire life. I have been giving things to Avery my entire life. I have been the bigger person, the older one, the strong one my entire life. And I did it because I loved this family. But this is not a borrowed dress. This is not birthday money. This is not a summer program. She took my husband. She had his child. And you knew. You both knew, and you sat across from me at every dinner, every holiday, every phone call for almost 2 years, and you said nothing." I said. I turned and started pulling clothes from the closet. "Not this time," I said quietly. I moved through the bedroom with shaking hands, pulling clothes off hangers, shoving everything into a bag. My head was throbbing. Wyatt was saying my name from somewhere behind me, but the words weren't reaching me anymore. All I knew was that I needed to get out of that house. "Miranda, please. Where will you go? You don't even have a plan," Mom sobbed. I zipped the bag closed. I picked it up. I looked at my mother, my father, and my husband one last time. Somewhere far away from all of you, I said. I walked through the living room one last time, past the couch and the coffee table and the wedding photo on the wall, and I opened the front door. Miranda, we love you. We have always loved you, Mom cried. I paused at the door for just a moment. I know you believe that, I said, and I walked out. I was never keeping anyone's peace again. I don't remember checking into the hotel. I remember pulling into the parking lot of the first one I saw with a vacancy sign lit up in the dark. I remember handing over my credit card at the front desk. I remember the door of the room closing behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed and I cried. I cried for my marriage, for the version of Wyatt I had believed in completely, for my sister who I had chosen to trust after everything we had been through growing up, for my parents who had looked me in the eye for almost 2 years and said nothing. I cried for Austin, who was 1 year old and innocent in all of this and would never even remember me. I cried until there was nothing left. Then I lay back and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally took me. When I woke up, the light was coming through the gap in the curtains. I lay still for a moment, and then I sat up. I reached for my phone. The notifications filled the screen from top to bottom. Missed calls and texts from numbers I had known my whole life. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all of them finding their voices now. All of them suddenly full of words they hadn't been able to locate yesterday when it actually mattered. Mom had called 4 times, Dad twice, Larry and Martha, more cousins, more aunts, more uncles. I scrolled through without opening anything. Wyatt's message stopped me for a moment. He said he would end it with Avery. He said he loved me. He said he would do whatever it took if I would just come home and talk to him. I kept scrolling. He didn't deserve a response. The man who was promising to end it was the same man who had stood in that party venue holding his secret child while his wife was at work. His promises had an expiration date I had already lived through. And then I found Avery's message. I'm sorry, Miranda. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. I just love Wyatt, and I know he loves me. Avery texted. Her opening was an apology. But the heart of that message, the part she couldn't help but include, the part that revealed exactly who Avery Stevens had always been. I just love Wyatt, and I know he loves me. She wanted me to know that she had won. I will never forgive you. I meant what I said last night. You are dead to me. I texted back. And then I put the phone face down on the nightstand and never checked it again. I called my boss next. She picked up on the second ring, and before I could even finish explaining, she stopped me. She could hear it in my voice. She said, I hadn't taken a single vacation day since I started, and whatever was happening, I needed to take the time. She would vouch for the request personally. Don't worry about us, Miranda. Just take care of yourself. I sat on that hotel bed and felt something move through my chest that I hadn't felt in almost 24 hours. Kindness. From the one person who had no obligation to give it to me. I sent the vacation request before I put the phone down. The second call I made was to a lawyer. I found her through a quick search, and her assistant answered on the first ring. I explained what I needed in as few words as possible. Divorce. There was an opening the very next day. I took it without hesitating. I sat with the phone in my lap after I hung up, and I thought about the house. Our house. Mine and Wyatt's. The mortgage we had split every single month without fail. And I knew, the way you know things about people you have spent years watching without realizing it, exactly what Avery wanted. She wanted that house. Of course she did. She had always wanted what belonged to Miranda. Her whole life she had reached for whatever her sister had and been handed it with a smile and an excuse. And now she had Miranda's husband, and her eye was already on the next thing. Not this time. I would sell that house. I would take every cent I was legally entitled to and use it to start over somewhere so far away that none of them would ever be able to show up at my door again. I was leaving this state. I got up and went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Swollen eyes, tired face, the wreckage of yesterday still written across every feature. But something else too. Something behind the eyes that hadn't been there before. I turned on the shower. I had a lawyer's appointment tomorrow, and after that, I had a life to build. I met with the lawyer the next morning. I walked in with a clear head and a simple agenda. The house, the assets, the marriage, everything that had my name attached to it I wanted accounted for and protected. My lawyer listened carefully and asked the right questions. She told me what I was entitled to. She told me how the process would work. She told me it could get complicated depending on how cooperative Wyatt decided to be. I told her I wasn't counting on his cooperation. She nodded like she had heard that before. I told her about the house, about the mortgage we had split, about my contributions, about every bill, every payment, every financial decision I had been a part of since the day we moved in together. I told her I wanted it sold. I told her I wanted every cent I was owed from that sale. She asked me if I understood that the other party might make this difficult. I told her if this needed to get ugly, then so be it. She smiled a small, quiet smile and told me she would be in touch. I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Control. For the first time since I walked through the doors of that birthday party, I was the one making decisions. I was the one holding something. And nobody, not Wyatt, not Avery, not my parents, was going to take that from me. A few days later, Lisa called me. Lisa was my cousin, Dad's brother's daughter. We had grown up together until her father's job took their family across the country when we were still teenagers. We had lost touch the way people do when distance and life get in the way. I hadn't seen her since we were kids sitting at the same holiday table. "Miranda, I don't even know where to start," Lisa said. Her voice was tight and careful, the way voices get when someone is carrying something they don't know how to put down. She told me she had just gotten back into town a few weeks ago, that she had lost touch with most of the family during the years her father was posted away, that when the invitation came from Aunt Sheila for Cousin Avery's son's first birthday, she hadn't thought twice about it. She had shown up to celebrate a baby turning one. She had walked into that venue thinking she was just attending a normal family party. She had no idea who Wyatt was. She didn't know Wyatt and I were married. It wasn't until after the party when she started asking questions that the pieces began falling into place. "Miranda, I am so sorry. I swear to you I had no idea. If I had known, I would never have walked through that door. What they did to you is so messed up. I am so sorry this happened to you." Lisa said. I believed her. It made complete sense. She had been gone for years. She had received an invitation from her aunt and shown up for a baby's birthday the way any normal person would. Lisa was the most innocent person in that room. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. I told her I understood completely, and I meant it. Then she told me what she had been hearing since the party. The room at that party had been small. Much smaller than it should have been for a family their size, because a lot of people had quietly refused to come. Aunts and uncles who had received that invitation figured out what was really going on and wanted no part of it. They hadn't warned me. But they hadn't shown up either. The ones who did show up hadn't been celebrating. Some of them had spoken up afterward and said it was wrong, that they hated the whole setup. But they had come because Sheila had called them personally and asked them to keep quiet and show up for the baby. They had listened to my mother. I just want you to know that not everyone was okay with this. I hope you get every single thing you deserve out of this, Miranda," Lisa said. I sat with that for a long moment after we hung up. Not everyone had been okay with it. It didn't fix anything, but it told me everything I needed to know about my mother. Sheila Stevens hadn't just kept a secret. She had managed an entire family around it. She had made phone calls. She had organized a birthday party built on her oldest daughter's pain and personally ensured that enough people showed up to make it look like everything was fine, all to protect Avery, the favorite, the one who always got what she wanted. I had heard everything I needed to hear. Life in the new apartment was quiet, small but mine. A bedroom, a kitchen, a window that caught the morning light in a way I hadn't expected to appreciate as much as I did. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the life I had built and believed in. But it had only my name on the door and nobody inside it who was keeping secrets from me. That was enough for now. I had blocked most of them by then. But every now and then a new number would come through. Wyatt from a different phone. Avery from an unknown number. My mother trying one more time with a carefully worded text that always started with baby or sweetheart, like the right opening word, could undo everything that had happened. I deleted them without reading past the first line. My lawyer called me on a Tuesday morning with a simple update. Wyatt had been served. I sat with that information for a quiet moment and felt something settle in my chest like a stone finding the bottom of still water. Good. By that afternoon, my phone was lighting up again. Avery first, then Mom, then Dad, then Martha. All of them within hours of each other. I ignored every single one of them. And then my mother sent a dinner invitation. A dinner invitation, as if she could set a table and light a candle and arrange things nicely enough that I would walk back into the version of our relationship where I smiled and swallowed everything and kept the peace. What for? So you can do what you do best? Make me feel guilty until I say yes to everything you ask? No, thank you. I texted back. Please, Miranda. We are still your parents. We love you and we just want to talk. The little boy needs stability. Please don't do this. Mom texted. No, you are not my parents. My parents would have protected me. Both of you would have defended me. And you would not have sat across from me for 2 years knowing what they knew and said absolutely nothing. You have one child and it is Avery. It has always been Avery. So here is my suggestion. If the child needs stability and your daughter needs a house, why don't you buy her one? Because she is not getting mine. That house belongs to me, and I will see it in court before I see her living in it. I texted. I put the phone down. The 3 dots on my mother's end disappeared and never came back. Outside my window, the morning light was doing that thing I had come to appreciate. Quiet and unhurried and entirely indifferent to the chaos of other people's choices. I made myself a cup of coffee and I sat by that window and I let the silence be exactly what it was, mine. The divorce papers sent everyone into a panic. Wyatt called, then called again, then called from a different number when I stopped answering the first one. My parents showed up at my apartment door twice. I looked through the peephole both times and walked back to my kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee. Larry and Martha called, pleading Wyatt's case like he was a child who had made a small mistake. I let my lawyer handle all of it. The only person I responded to was Wyatt. He sent a long message, paragraphs of explanation and regret and promises that I didn't read past the first few lines. I typed back one thing and one thing only. No apology in this world will fix what you have done. You made your choice the moment you chose my sister. You made it again every single day after that. And you made it when you gave her a child. Now I am making mine. I want the house. I sent. He knew what that meant. The house would have to be sold. Neither of us had the kind of money to buy the other out, and we both knew it. Whatever came from that sale would be divided, and his share would be significantly smaller once the alimony was factored in. My lawyer made sure of that. It was Avery who broke first. She found a way to reach me through a number I hadn't blocked yet. She called me heartless. She said I was punishing an innocent child, that Austin would have nowhere to go, that I was doing this out of spite. Don't you dare use an innocent child. Just remember, his mother is dead to me. I sent. She didn't reply after that. My parents tried one last time, a long message from Mom about how they were still my parents and always would be, about how family was forever even when it was broken. I read it once, and I blocked her. Then I blocked Dad. Then I blocked every number that had caused me nothing but pain since the day I walked into that birthday party. The house sold faster than any of us expected. I sat in my small apartment the day the paperwork was finalized, and I looked at the number in my bank account, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: freedom and relief. When I went back to work, I told my boss that I was thinking about leaving, that I needed to go somewhere far away and start completely over, that I was grateful for everything, but I couldn't stay in a city where every street corner held a memory I was trying to outrun. She listened the way she always did, carefully and without interruption, and then she leaned forward and said there was an open position in Hawaii. Hawaii? I asked. She smiled. New branch in Hawaii. Good salary. A fresh start somewhere beautiful if I wanted it. I thought about Avery calling me heartless. I thought about my mother's voice asking me to keep the peace one more time. I thought about the balloons, red and gold, and Austin's little hand wrapped around Wyatt's collar. And then I thought about waking up somewhere new, somewhere warm, somewhere that had absolutely nothing to do with any of them. "When do I start?" I asked. So, 2 months later, I got here in Hawaii. I remember stepping off the plane and feeling the warm air hit my face and just standing there for a moment in the middle of everyone moving around me with their luggage and their destinations and their lives. I changed my number the next day. The only person I gave it to was Lisa. I made her promise not to share it with anyone in the family. Not a single person. She promised, and she kept that promise every single time they asked. Nobody in this airport knew my name. Nobody here knew about the birthday party, or the balloons, or the silence of a room full of people who had chosen someone else over me. Nobody knew about Wyatt, or Avery, or the house, or the years I had spent being the bigger person until I had nothing left to give. I was just a woman with a suitcase and a job waiting for her and a life that was entirely and completely her own. I took a breath. And I walked forward. The apartment my company helped me find was small, but it had a lanai that looked out over something so beautiful I stood on it every single morning with my coffee and just breathed. The kind of view that reminds you that the world is much larger than the small, painful corner of it you came from. I made friends slowly. Carefully. The way you make friends when you have learned what it costs to trust the wrong people. But I made them. Real ones. People who knew me only as Miranda. Not as the older sister or the peacekeeper or the strong one or the one who could handle it. Just Miranda. I called Lisa every couple of weeks. She was the only thread I kept connected to a life I had left behind, and I kept it because she had earned it. Because she had walked into that party innocent and walked out loyal. She called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was on my lanai with my coffee when the phone rang. She didn't waste time with small talk. She never did. She told me Wyatt and Avery had moved into a smaller apartment after the house sold, that Wyatt was struggling to make ends meet between the alimony and the bills, that Avery couldn't work because Austin was too little, and the friends who had found out the truth had quietly disappeared from her life, that she was still bitter about the house, still talking about it like a wound she couldn't stop touching. And then Lisa told me the part that I hadn't expected. Avery had been calling my parents to complain about Wyatt. Apparently, he couldn't help himself. It just came out of him, at dinner, in passing, in the middle of arguments. Miranda always kept the house clean. Miranda would come home tired from work and still made sure there was dinner on the table. Miranda helped me financially. Miranda this, Miranda that. The woman he chose Avery over living rent-free in his mouth every single day. And Avery knew it was true. That was the part that hurt her most. She couldn't even argue with him because she had lived in that house. She had seen what I built. She had wanted it badly enough to betray her own sister for it. Now she had the man. And the man couldn't stop talking about the wife he lost. Lisa said Wyatt was bitter. Not at me. Just at the situation. At the smaller apartment and the bills and the life that looked nothing like what he had imagined when he was making his choices. He chose that life. Every single morning he woke up and chose it again. My parents were still asking Lisa if she had a number for me. She always said she didn't know. Then she told me the family had finally said it to their faces, that the way they raised Avery wasn't love, that she was fearless her whole life because she always knew they would clean up her mess, that she couldn't stand on her own because nobody ever made her face anything. And then someone said, "Now look at Miranda. She takes care of herself just fine without your help." Lisa said my mother had gone very quiet after that. I thanked Lisa and we said our goodbyes. I put the phone down and looked out at the view for a long moment. My name is Miranda Cole. This is how my story ended and how my real life began. That's our story for today. What do you think? Please comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you all for listening. This is Melodic Vengeance. I will see you next time. Take care. Okay?
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.